Welcome to episode 561 of the Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy. In today's episode, I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Leslie John, author of Revealing, the Underrated Power of Oversharing. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. When you hear the word oversharing, what comes to mind? A cringy social media post? That coworker who always tells you too much about their weekend? We've all been conditioned to think that the real risk is saying too much. But what if the bigger danger comes with saying too little? That is the provocative argument from today's guest, Dr. Leslie John, a behavioral scientist at Harvard Business School and the author of the new book, Revealing, the Underrated Power of Oversharing. Her research turns the typical advice on its head, showing that while oversharing might get the headlines, the real issue for most of us is undersharing and the missed opportunities that come with it. So often, we hold back out of fear of embarrassment or rejection, but what Leslie has found is that thoughtfully revealing more than we think we should can actually build stronger connections, increase trust, and even improve decision-making in work and life. As you listen today, I encourage you to consider where might you be holding back a little too much, and what could shift if you shared just a little more. Really quickly, before we get into the conversation, I want to be sure you know that there are links in the show notes for my top related past episodes and books, ways to get in touch, and more. It's all waiting for you in the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/561. Now let's jump right in. Dr. Leslie John, welcome to the Brainy Business Podcast.
Hi, Melina. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I am so excited to have you here to have our nice chat today. For everyone who doesn't yet know you, can you share a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. I am a behavioral scientist. I work at Harvard Business School. I would call myself somewhat of a recovering privacy expert because for many years, the first half of my career so far, I studied people's decisions to share or not share, largely online, and largely documented in true behavioral economics form, the errors that we make with our privacy, how we give marketers all this information without thinking about it, and we sign things carte blanche, privacy policies. And that's not wrong, but it's also, I think, very narrow and not right. And so over time, what I realized about my research was that the single most consistent thing was how much people revealed to me, how willing they were to be forthcoming. And that suggested to me, I don't think people are stupid. I think there must be something really right about what they're doing. Sure, we make mistakes and we get tricked, but it led me to be really fascinated in the question of why do we reveal and what does it get us? So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. And so, as you started kind of like digging into why do we reveal things, I do have to ask, knowing that I, saw some of this in your book, but how much of that choice to like really dig in on that came down from that very first, sort of prisoner's dilemma experience that you had on like first day? That's cool.
100%. I mean, I am trained, I am a hardcore decision scientist, behavioral economics gal. It's like even in my DNA, I would say, because I come from a long line of very indecisive and very quirky decision makers. So I don't think it was ever possible for me to not become a decision scientist. So yeah, it was very much in this, what are the decision-making errors that we make box.
Yeah. And so I know you had mentioned, just for people that haven't read the book yet, as far as, so you go in to school. Can you tell a little bit about that story?
Yes, of course. So it was the first week of grad school. And of course, I'm on my best behavior. Intelligence, competence is king in grad school. You want to send a signal that you're smart. And like most people, I had an imposter syndrome, but of course did not want to reveal that. And so I'm trying to impress people. And we had in one of our first exercises we did, there was only like 6 of us or so in this cohort. And the professor, who's a very famous professor, fancy professor of experimental economics, he comes in and he has us do this exercise, and he smacks down $20 on the table and he puts us into pairs. And he said, everyone's going to make a decision in your pair. On the count of 3, you're going to simultaneously reveal whether you decide to split or steal. And if both people decide to split, then you each get $10. If one of you chooses steal and the other chooses split, the one who chooses steal gets all $20. And if both of you succumb to temptation, and he didn't say it like that, and I'm dramatizing. And if both of you he actually said it in a very rigorous way, which was like, you don't want to show your cards. If both of you put steal, then nobody gets anything. Burn it down. And this is, of course, a prisoner's dilemma, where if you both cooperate, you get a really good outcome, but there's always this temptation to defect because you can get the best outcome by betraying the other. And so the standard results in this paradigm is that the game essentially devolves into both people playing steal and nobody getting anything. But what I did, because I was like peace and love, happiness coming in, and we're supposed to cooperate and love each other, and we're going to be a cohort and snuggly wuggly rapport, I decided to play split. And I, of course, was the only one that played split, because that is an error in the sense that you're supposed to do what the standard economics would predict in this case. And I did not do that. And so I basically revealed myself to be an idiot to the people I was most wanting to impress. And my partner was the only one who walked away with money, the whole $20. And that, of course, I ruminated about it. I was like, how do I come back from this? But in hindsight, I'm glad I did that, because that's who I am. And I wanted to show a signal of welcomingness. And I ended up forging really strong relationships with my cohort. I don't know that was the sole cause. Maybe they befriended me in spite of it. Maybe they're like, she needs help, we need to be nice to her. But at any rate, #no regrets.
Well, 100%. I would have gone split, which it's like now everybody knows. I guess everyone should play Prisoner's Dilemma with us because...
Yeah, I know. No, but maybe we'll mix it up sometimes.
You don't know. It feels like friends, right? They're like, they don't know. We know they know. We know. Yeah. Overthinking, like you're talking about, yes. Which really ties in so much to this idea of whether or not we should share information about ourselves, right? I know that I personally have had so many times. How often you have that, like, some sort of conversation in your head of like, I know what I'm going to say when I tell someone this story. And I think this might be what I would say when it comes down to it. But you just like wrestle with the idea of whether or not you should share something. And it could be anything from like what I ate for breakfast today to, some big dramatic item that, and that's like personal work, what have you. And so we're going to definitely get into, when to reveal things and like how to decide whether or not we should and how people struggle with that. Before we get into that quandary that people find themselves in and kind of getting into how we can make those decisions.
2 points.
Can you define a little bit? Because I know for like we humans, like the idea of sharing, like I know what that means. I know what it means to share or overshare or undershare to me, but academically, I'm guessing you have some like ideas of what it means to share information or, aspects of yourself. So like, how do you define, some of these kind of key terms as you think about this idea of what to share?
Yes. I think of this question of what to reveal and what to not reveal as a question of how much of myself, my thoughts and my feelings should I share. So it's revealing personal things. Yeah, it's quite simple, actually. I've tried to make it pared down. And then oversharing would be sharing too much, and under is sharing too little. But those are a little bit loose, admittedly, because we use the term oversharing. I think we need to use the term undersharing a lot more. It's part of the problem. We worry a lot about TMI, too much information, that gut wrenching. Oh, I said too much. And that's valid. But we don't even have a term. Well, I just made one up. TLI, too little information. That's the other side. But in fact, it's hard to be black and white about it. I don't think this is a black and white thing. Like, it's hard to say that was over, that was under in a narrow sense, because the reality is there's so many goals we're trying to pursue at once when we're thinking about revealing. It could be, I want to become close to this person. I want to be heard. I want to make a change. I want to motivate. I want to influence. I want to persuade. I want to have fun. You may have all those things at one time. And so that's part of what makes these decisions hard, is you have multiple goals. They often conflict. And you also, the vividness of the TMI, when, I talk about many in the book of my own. You're welcome. And so that's really vivid to us. When we do cross that line. But even when we cross that line, there is often redemption, as I also discovered as I was writing the book.
Right. Yeah. And so in that way, it would be nice to say, like, if you share about money, like, that's oversharing, but, like, whatever, there aren't necessarily categories, because, like, where I might be very comfortable talking about money, but I'm not comfortable talking about health, and someone else loves talking about health, and I'm not. And so, like, me revealing something about my health could be feeling like it's getting into oversharing territory because it's uncomfortable for me. So that, like, how much does context, I guess, play into that?
Yeah, great question. So context, in my view and experience, is at least half of what dictates what's going on here, right? Like, context, think about it, like revealing that you have an STD in a doctor's office. I mean, it's hard. We feel shame. There may be a lot of things associated with how we feel, but it's not weird. It's not oversharing. It's appropriate there. But in most other contexts, it would be inappropriate. So that's just the same thing can be vastly different depending on who's in the room, what the goals are, how you're feeling, all of these things. But there are also things, this is quite intuitive, that generally are more sensitive than other things. But does that mean it's a overshare to share them? I wouldn't make that blanket. And I know you're not saying that either, Melina, but we've done studies where we get people. So as part of my job for years and years, I have been asking people very sensitive questions. And so I run analyses on these questions. Every few years, I recheck them and see how do people rate them in terms of how sensitive they are. Do the things that are sensitive change over time? They haven't really. And I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. And they're also, so the most sensitive things, the consistently most sensitive things are questions about sex, right? Those are the most intimate, sensitive things, again and again, rated those ways. Finances are also sensitive, not quite as sensitive as sex stuff. And the sensitivity is also quite consistent across cultures too. So sex is sensitive here. Sex is sensitive in Japan. It's there are huge different contextual differences and norms, cultural norms in what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, and so on. But in terms of like what is deep, what is sensitive, that's pretty intuitive.
Definitely. Well, good to know. And I love, that context matters. I would love to transition and talk about this as it applies to work, right? So as we think about sharing information at work, for what are some initial things that you think are important? I have so many thoughts and questions for you,
good.
But how
Bring
would you want to kick that off?
So the workplace is a unique context, and that's a context where your perceived competence, your credibility matters a heck of a lot oftentimes. And so I think a lot of times people have the instinct of, oh, it's oversharing is way more dangerous at work. I wouldn't say that. I would say just like in romance, just like in friendship, we have so many opportunities to share more and get more benefits. Of course, there are real dangers, unique dangers of sharing a lot. And we have to kind of juggle these dangers as we make these decisions. One way that I have found it helpful to think about this is to distinguish between transparency and vulnerability. So you can think of transparency as cognitive openness. So letting someone into your thought process, describing how you think about things. Vulnerability, on the other hand, is more sensitive, a lot more sensitive. And that entails revealing sensitive thoughts and feelings. It's often feelings. Feelings tend to be more sensitive to talk about. And in general, if you want kind of a general rule of thumb, what I use, transparency is usually very safe. And it's a lot lower risk. Vulnerability is higher risk, higher reward. So if you're getting into vulnerability territory, I think we have to be very, very mindful because, of course, once we reveal something, we can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's kind of, there's a finality to it. So that's one way that you may find it helpful to think about these decisions.
Yeah. Well, and I know in the book, you give some really great examples, like verbiage wise, in what it looks like when it's being transparent versus vulnerable, and always love getting into some application. Can you share, obviously they don't have to be exactly what it says in the book if you don't have those verbatim, but can you share?
You mean I haven't memorized it? Yes. So transparency is telling people about the process of how you think. So it would be saying something, for example, like if you said it without transparency, you might say, I read your draft and it needs to be a lot tighter, the writing. If you're being more transparent, you could say, as I was reading your draft, what I was thinking about was, how would the reader understand this? Because I'm acting as a reader and it's more verbose, clearly, but you're kind of thinking through like, hey, this is how I thought about it as I read it. I thought about it from the reader's perspective. And for me, that wasn't clear. So you're giving more you're going under the hood and you're giving someone insight into your brain, how you processed it, your experience of reading it. And so does that help explain transparency? That was a very boring example, but
I don't think so. I love that example because one, that's a very clear thing that happens all the time, right? Where if you're giving that sort of feedback, and I think people do feel stress about giving feedback. I don't just think that. I know that
100%.
Not everyone and not all the time, right?
And we avoid it then, right? We undershare tough things.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then it may feel like, well, I just have to give the quick, confident answer, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to say, be more firm. Just like, what? Okay, thank you. I don't know what that means, right? Like firm in what way? I don't know what that is, right? Tighter writing is what again? And
I know completely. What does tighter writing mean? Like, I'm an alien from outer space. Tell me, what does that? That's what I sometimes do to my colleagues. We academics are not the best at speaking human. So.
And so to show that aspect, like you said, of that being transparent, right? To say, as I was reading it, I was thinking about this, right? Which is, I think, such a great prompt that anybody can use in most context to be able to have that, I'm a little more open. You feel like you know me a little bit, but it's not that you're saying. So if we were going to get into vulnerable territory, right, would be like, oh, well, maybe that's while I was reading, I was feeling very emotional because you used the word juxtaposition, and that was my aunt's favorite word, and like I remembered when I was a child, or like something, right? Is there a better example of the actually like reasonable vulnerable?
I was gonna go was I was gonna tease my doctoral advisor, who I love, of course, because I wouldn't be where I am without him. So now I get to tease him too, because I just said that. Which is that, so for me, I'd be like, when I was reading this, I was thinking back to when I was getting my PhD and how my advisor sat me, I was writing these drafts and it was terrible, and I was not getting better. And so he called me into his office. He sat me down in front of his computer and he opened the document and we went through the first paragraph and he had me justify every single word. And that's
I hated
it. Right. And it was, it was like it was very uncomfortable, the experience, but now I'm getting it. And so that would be the vulnerability thing I was thinking about in the spirit of transparency and vulnerability. But that actually was a gift, because it was a paradigm shift for me in thinking about writing. It helped me have this outside view, get out of my own head in writing. And then once I realized, oh my gosh, this is so not clear. And it made me realize how much words matter. It's not blah, 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 like every single word. Yes, I'm a little neurotic about writing. He did instill that in me, but that was such a gift to me. And I do think that the point about feedback, it's so important. The way we learn, really the only way to learn, is to get feedback. It's so important. It really is a gift. It's cheesy to say, but it's such a gift. And yet we shy away from giving it, understandably. But actually, a very close friend of mine, Allison Brooks, we ran a bunch of studies where we were trying to see what is a good way to make the medicine go down, to give feedback. And we were actually it was a little snarky, the project, because this idea of a feedback sandwich, that you should start with the positive, then put it in the middle. And then we're like, that's so lame. And we were like, this isn't right. And so we did tests to see, is there merit to the feedback sandwich? And what we kept finding was that there is merit. We're like, this is actually quite effective. And the reason it's effective to start with the positive, it's disarming, right? Because it's so threatening. It's so threatening to get negative feedback. It activates like our reptilian brain, I think. There's probably studies on that, but it's very threatening, even to the most self-assured people. And so getting something positive to start is just, it's disarming, and you are less defensive. It's easier to give feedback that way. So I always start with effusiveness before I give feedback. And there's lots of ways of framing feedback to make it. There's lots of great science on this too that's being undertaken right now. But I digress. Oh, the other thing there was another thing I wanted to say about this idea of like, what does it mean to be transparent? And so we talked about how you can think of it as opening the hood on like what's going on in your brain and your thinking processes. That's how thinking processes work. Like they're like that. But there's also semantically, like, there's a colleague of mine, Dan Cable at London Business School. He's done amazing work on this, where he and his colleagues have they've audio recorded people in interviews, job interviews, for example, and they've tried to analyze, what does it sound like to be authentic, to sound real? And it turns out that people who are more real, who are more transparent, they have more glue words, and glue words are connecting words like and, such as, they, like, it's these small connecting glue words that technically aren't required. So if you were to just write the most concise script ever, you wouldn't have as many of these glue words. And so having these glue words is what we naturally do in a conversation, and you just become more real, as opposed to, we all know the situation of where a candidate sounds canned. They sound like a script. The reason they sound that way is because they probably have memorized a script, because you can tell it doesn't have the glue words. So literally, authenticity sounds different.
That's perfect. Actually, I was going to ask you about job interviews. That was the next question that I had. So it's like perfect timing. And so you do have more, good tips and applicable advice here. So as we think about, we talked a little bit about wanting to come off as confident. You're trying to convince the people that they should hire you, right? And you want to be your best self, which of course makes you extra stressed. And you're so worried, like focusing illusion everywhere as far as like,
Yes.
oh, did I blink? Is there something on my shirt? Like, oh, no, I can't believe I did that. Right. And we're so worried about saying something. So how do we know that like sweet spot of what to share or not share when it comes to a job interview?
Great. So again, I would go to transparency. I think you want to do that. It even lends credence to what you're saying. It's more credible, right? When you say the thought process, it's more believable. It's more real, and not being a script. So one thing to do if you are preparing for an interview, which I'm always, you got to prepare. I would not recommend writing out answers to questions. What I would recommend is obviously think about the questions, think about the toughest questions. You always want to try to think, what is my most dreaded question I could be asked? And spend 5 minutes in your pajamas when you're comfortable thinking about possible answers and write down bullet point. So you don't want to write a script, because then you're going to feel like it's a script. And then in the interview, you're going to sound scripted. And then if you go off script, if you can't think of the next word, it's a nightmare. So you want to just focus on the idea, the content of what you want to say. And that's how I would recommend that. The other thing, so the big question of what to say, what to share, what to not share, what to reveal, and what to not reveal. This is a high stakes situation, an interview. It's a very competitive situation. It's evaluative. So this is a situation where we need to be quite careful about what we reveal. But even still, studies have shown that revealing a little bit more than you think you should, or that you might be inclined to ordinarily, can get you a lot of good in this situation. So for example, more Dan Cable's research, where they found that when interviewees were more authentic, so for example, did all those things we've already talked about, but also even said some vulnerable stuff like answering the question, what are your weaknesses, with a somewhat real weakness instead of the, I work too hard. Something that is, sometimes time management is a bit of an issue for me, and I'm really aware of it, and I've got some great coaching on it, right? So saying something like that, like a real weakness, I don't know that I would say it exactly the way I just said it, but something that is real, and framing it as you're self-aware and you're on it, right? That sends so many positive signals. And so it can actually be a virtue. It also makes you more likable, more real. It can even make you come across as more competent, because the person who is actually willing to say something real is more confident, they're more competent, they've got things under control. What they have found in these studies is that if you are someone who is a qualified candidate for the job, when you are a little real like this, you actually are more likely to get the job, and you are more likely to match in a job that is a good fit for you, which also makes sense when you think about it, because when you think like you're also interviewing them, and so you want to see how do they respond to you, and they're seeing if you're a fit. So if you let them see a little bit of you, then it really helps make that match. I will share a story of my own, which is to wit. So when I learned about Dan's research, I immediately went back to this scenario that happened to me, which was I was in a job interview. I was a baby academic for a very fancy university, and I was sitting in the room in the first round interview in a hotel suite at a conference, and a bunch of faculty there interviewing me. I walk in, I'm super nervous, and one of the faculty members there said, he looked at my CV and he said, "Oh, you used to be a ballet dancer." And he said, "I was too." And I should say that he doesn't have a ballet dancer's physique. And in that moment, what I did was with one word, I felt like my job prospects had gone poof with one word, one unfiltered blurt, because when I'm nervous, I tend to blurt things out. So he said, "I was a dancer." And what I did was I impulsively looked him up and down, and I cocked my head and I said, "Clearly." like in this super sassy, sarcastic tone. And I'm like, oh my God, my face turned. It's like I poured gasoline on me and I lit a match. Like, there it goes, gone. Oh my gosh. But the crazy thing is that I got the job and it was at Harvard. and the guy I insulted, he is a beloved, he just retired, and he was such a close mentor, and he loved telling that story to new candidates. He'd say, when she said that, we thought, she's a jerk too. She'll fit right in here. and what he meant was like, you have to project confidence even when you don't feel so confident to succeed in the classroom here. And so I think he was tapping into that kind of, the sass can be very helpful. And I do have some sass. I just try to use it in a respect. Like, I try not to sass people that I'm trying to impress.
Yeah, have hire you.
But then I read Dan's research and I thought, oh, wow, there maybe is redemption in that. Maybe that is partly why I got the job.
Yeah, I love that. And it was such a fun story to read in the book too. So as we go to close out, which I hate this idea, but as we're getting, close to the end of our time, when we think about, again, with this at work, and if it's going to be, so we've talked the interview, right? But as we think about revealing, I think there's a bit about thinking about power dynamics, right? So is there anything different to keep in mind of like employee sharing up versus managers sharing down, and like across team members, things to keep in mind there?
Great question. So of course, we have a status hierarchy in the world. I was listening to Toby's interview recently. And of course, in the workplace, it's often very hierarchical and very salient. What I would say is, so yes, this is a very important variable. And the way I think about it, as when you move up the status totem pole in the workplace, you gain competence credibility. You have a bank of credibility that increases. And so if you reveal something that may be a little bit undermining, strictly speaking, in a narrow sense of your competence, like sometimes I get nervous public speaking, that's like a grain of salt. It's a drop in the bucket. It does not decrease your perceived competence because you've got so much already. And the benefit is that we've done many studies with leaders in firms, when they reveal a little more than they think they should, like a mild weakness like that, it makes their employees more motivated to work for them, more trusting of them. In fact, there's even research by Constantine Koutaferis and Adam Grant at Wharton, where what they did was they assessed different ways that leaders could ask for feedback. Ding, ding, ding. There's that magical thing again, right? We need feedback. We need honest feedback to get better. But leaders have a hard time getting honest feedback in the 360 review from their employees, right? Because the boss can't handle it, is what we all think. And a lot of times we're right, but I digress. So the tricky thing is, as a leader, how do you get this input? And oftentimes what the instinct is just to say, I can take it. Please tell me your honest thoughts, to kind of implore and assure. And what Adam and Constantine did is they randomized leaders to either do that, the standard thing, or elicit feedback by saying, hey, I'm aware that one of the things I'm not so great at is time management, and I'm working on it. When they model that they can take it, when they show they can take it by revealing something, that is what makes people comfortable giving their honest feedback, which in turn is a virtuous cycle, right? Because then the leaders can become even more competent because they have that feedback.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And at the risk of confusing more to the audience, in this case of the idea of a vulnerability loop, which I was thinking about a lot in the book, but because you're defining vulnerability and transparency differently, but like, I want to make sure that we know. So like, I was thinking about vulnerability loops so much while I was listening or reading the book. And then I think I have a whole episode on vulnerability loops because I love them. And then getting like your team to buy in is so important, whether it's like as a leader. Like, I think behavioral economics, when it comes to the business aspect of using this in a company, you need to get people to buy in on your ideas, right? That influence matters so much. And opening that vulnerability loop is such a great way to build that trust, make that happen. I would say, based on what you're talking about here, like you may open the vulnerability loop by being vulnerable. You may also open up a vulnerability loop with some transparency
Yes.
instead?
Yes.
Like, would you agree?
Yes,
Like,
for sure. And it's the kind of thing that it's, you may want to start with transparency.
Yeah.
Because it's safer. See how it goes. Experiment.
Right.
And that's part of this is these decisions. It's a skill. We can learn it. And what we need to do to learn it and get better though is practice. So we're going to make mistakes. We should keep experimenting, do little mini experiments with yourself. Try transparency. If it's not really, if you think people, they're reacting well to it, but they're hungry for more, then give them a little bit of vulnerability.
Right. And I think the key with that vulnerability loop idea too is just being willing, especially I think when you're the leader, to go first, right? Where it feels
100%.
a little bit off. And if it is with a group of peers, like anybody can kind of be the one to do the thing first, right? But if you don't model that by starting to give better feedback, right? Where instead of just saying, make that writing tighter, you say, like, while I was reading, I thought, right? I love that as such an easy example. Like when you were presenting, like I was wondering about, right? Just like some easy prompts that we can, like, right. And like you said, even to say, I know I've always struggled with finding that right word to like open up a presentation. I worked on that by doing this. Like, is there anything else that you noticed in my presentation?
This is great because 100% what you're saying. Plus, yes, and pairing it with question asking. We do not ask nearly enough questions. And when
Preach.
yeah, right. And I know you've talked about this too. Questions are so important. They do so much for us. Of course, we learn more. That's maybe the most obvious thing about them, but they build rapport. People like us. There have been amazing studies by Alison Brooks, one of my besties again, where like they randomize people to ask more questions or fewer questions. The more questions you ask, the more liked you are. The more questions salespeople ask in a sales call, the more likely they are to close the sale, which just blows my mind because when you think about sales, we often think of like persuade. And no, it's about ask, learn. Let them do the talking. And so pairing a little bit of vulnerability with, and how do you experience that? Or how do you feel about that even? That can really be a great 1-2 punch.
Oh, I love it. And such a wonderful point, I guess, that we can kind of close up on here, knowing I could talk to you for 150 years and still have more thoughts and questions and things. So as we do close out this conversation here today, any, last thoughts you have, as well as for everyone who I know is so excited now to learn more, get their copy of Revealing, follow you, all the things. Yay! Where's the best place for them to go to do that?
They can go to my website, proflesliejohn.com. I guess on LinkedIn too. Yeah. I have to rehearse this more. LinkedIn, awesome. Prof. Leslie John.
Perfect. And we will, of course, have links in the show notes for everyone to make it easy so they can go and check that out and move forward with a life where they are more likely to overshare and avoid that risk of undersharing. There was one quote that I had seen on something you had written that I really liked, saying that we live in fear of saying too much, but it's usually saying too little that costs us the most. Such a great point. So we end with a thought from you said by me, which I'm sure doesn't have the same impact, but it really resonated with me. So thank you again, Leslie, for joining me on the show. It was really delightful to share and learn from you today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you again to Dr. Leslie John for joining me on the show today. What got your brain buzzing in today's conversation? For me, I loved hearing that most of us are not sharing enough. It's so easy to worry about saying too much and being accused of TMI that we overlook how powerful it can be to be a little more open. As Leslie shared, TLI, or too little information, is real and can actually be an even more dangerous problem. Whether you're a leader, a team member, or someone navigating a job interview, this insight matters. People can't connect with you or trust you if they don't know you. And as Leslie's research shows, disclosure builds warmth and trust, especially when leaders go first. That openness creates the psychological safety teams need to thrive, which is one of the most essential ingredients for getting buy-in and leading effective change. If you want to learn more about that, I recommend checking out my book, What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You. And as we close out the show, here's my question for you. What's something you've been holding back that might actually be worth revealing? Start by sharing it with me on social media. You'll find us as the Brainy Biz pretty much everywhere, and you'll find me as Melina Palmer on LinkedIn. There are links in the show notes to make it easy, as well as links to my top related past episodes and books, including Revealing, ways to get in touch, and more. It's all waiting for you in the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/561. And thank you again to Dr. Leslie John for joining me on the show today. It was a delight to chat with and learn from you. Join me next time for another brainy episode of the Brainy Business Podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun. You don't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Melina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.